Let me start off by saying my son, Adam, is 22 years old. Back when my ex-wife, Tori, and I were trying for kids, we found out that I was infertile. We decided we'd adopt, then about 4 months later my ex-wife is pregnant. I was thrilled because I thought maybe the doctor made a mistake. No, I was wrong. My ex-wife cheated on me and I didn't find out until 20 years later. Tori told me 2 years ago that she cheated on me. And we did a paternity test to make sure, and well, he's not my biological son. My ex and I divorced a few weeks later. Ever since my son found out the truth, he wanted to meet his biological father. He did, and they started to become really close. It hurt me much more than I thought it would. He's an adult, he can make his own decisions, but it hurt really bad. They started to bond really well, and all of a sudden Adam became really distant from me. It's been like this for almost a year and a half. I tried to text him to make plans for dinner and he said he's busy with Chris, biological father. I tried numerous times to connect with him by calling and texting, but he never made plans aside from like a meal every other month. We used to do stuff every other week, but it's been completely different since he found out about Chris. I couldn't stand it. My son, who I raised since he was a baby, treated me like I didn't matter. Anytime we'd actually have plans, he would still be cold and distant. What I mean by that is became much more defensive of his personal life. I'd ask him how classes or friends were and he'd just say they were fine but never go deeper than that. He also changed his major from econ to computer science and didn't even mention it to me until a year later. I told him how much he was hurting me because of how distant he was and he apologized and said he'd do better. He never did. I told him numerous times and he never changed. He was still distant. What was the final straw for me was the phone conversation I had with him last week. He said he was going to change his last name to Chris because he liked it so much and because they were close. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him this. I can't believe you are going to do this. That's really disappointing to me. If you decide to change your last name, go ahead, but if you do that, then I'm no longer your father and I don't want to be involved in your life. He hung up on me. I didn't even bother reaching out because I know he wouldn't respond. I stand by what I said. I meant every word and still do. The last name change to me means he no longer views me as a father and views Chris as his, despite the fact he's 22. My family told me I'm being unreasonable, meanwhile my best friends think it's reasonable. After I found out about Chris, I took a couple of days and didn't speak to my ex-wife or Adam. They didn't contact me. I didn't contact them. I needed a break. A lot of you are asking for a deeper meaning behind this, and I think I finally figured out why he's been so cold. A few months before my wife told us the truth, we were in a very long argument. His grandma, my mother, left a big inheritance for him that I am fully in charge of. Enough to pay for college and have enough wiggle room to not stress all the time about it. After a semester of university, he started dating this girl. He was head over heels in love with her. I never met the girl, so I have zero clue how she felt about the relationship. Suddenly, after a few months of dating, Adam asked me for about $3,000 to be deposited into his account from the inheritance. I already paid for the semester, so this was odd to me. I asked Adam why he needed the money. He said his girlfriend was having trouble paying for her tuition and asked my son to help. I told him no because it seemed to me that she was treating him like a piggy bank. He spent over $1,000 on her in just under a few months. He would constantly talk about how he loved going shopping with her so he could buy her things. To me, she was just after my son's inheritance, and I was right. What I said to him was basically this: Adam, you haven't been dating this girl for very long at all, and for me to give you that much money just to spend on her after a few months doesn't sit well with me. That's the money your grandmother left you for your college career, not hers. If you two were more serious, then I would think about it, but I'm not giving you that much money to just give your girlfriend. Turns out my guess was right, and she was after his money. They broke up shortly after and have had an on-again, off-again relationship ever since. He was upset with me, but he eventually got over it after a few months. Then we found out about my ex's affair. I don't know if that's the real reason he's so cold. That was a huge argument that went on for weeks until she left him. My fiancé Ollie and I have been together for 4 years, living together for 2, recently got engaged. Our relationship has been great for the most part. One of the few things we disagree on is animals. I love animals and Ollie feels indifferent towards most animals. To give a little background about me, I've always been an animal lover. Throughout my childhood, my mom hated animals, especially dogs. My mom never let us have any pets, and she used to tell us that once we were adults we could have whatever animals we wanted. When I moved away for college, I lived on campus for 4 years, and therefore couldn't have any pets. I've wanted a dog for as long as I could remember, but up until recently it wasn't in the cards for me to have a dog. Ollie and I currently live in a not-so-pet-friendly city for renters. I always lived in apartments that never allowed pets, even with a pet deposit. When Ollie and I met, I told her about wanting to get a dog someday. Ollie told me that she doesn't like a lot of dogs, but would be open to the right dog. This was in the very beginning of us meeting. I basically made it really clear that I will own a dog one day. Throughout our relationship, I would occasionally bring up wanting a dog. Ollie would remind me that our apartment doesn't allow for pets, which was true. Ollie and I agreed that once we moved into a place that allowed for pets, we would look into getting a dog. About 2 months ago, Ollie and I moved into a house just outside of the city we work in. The house is a good size for the two of us, plus extra. The landlord is pet-friendly, and the house has a huge, fenced-in yard. It's a much more residential area, and there's a dog park about 3 blocks from the house. On top of the house being perfect for a dog, I'm in a financial place where I can afford a dog. I make very good money and I don't have to travel for work. I'm mentally prepared for potential pet fees and other expenses for having people watch the dog. Since we're finally settled in the house, I decided to mention to Ollie again about going to the shelter and looking at the adoptable dogs. Only this time, Ollie didn't have an excuse for why we couldn't get one. After a few weak excuses, sometimes we go away, Ollie broke down and told me that she doesn't want a dog. In fact, she's never wanted a dog. She was hoping I would forget about my dreams of wanting a dog. I'm not sure what to do. I'm trying to reason with Ollie, but she said her answer will always be no to a dog. She just doesn't like them and doesn't want them. She basically gave me an ultimatum, either her or my potential dog. I'm feeling shitty about this, because I always made it clear to her that I was going to want a dog someday. I feel like she was banking on something unrealistic, and now she's putting me in a lousy spot. My husband and I have been married for 3 years now. I have a daughter, 15 years old, and he has a son, 24 years old. I am friendly with my stepson, but we aren't close. He has a biological mother who is a perfectly fine woman. I'm not here to take the role of his mom. My late husband, my daughter's father, died when my daughter was 6. We both contributed to her college fund. My daughter's paternal grandparents have also contributed a large amount. Right now, the fund has about $180,000. My daughter is extremely bright, and I'm not just saying that because I'm her mom. I truly believe she has the capacity to go to an Ivy League school, and her teachers have said she has the potential as well. And I don't want costs to hold her back. Our income would be too high to get any meaningful financial aid. And while there are a few merit-based scholarships out there that she will be applying to, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket and hope she gets it when it's so competitive. My current husband and I have separate finances. He doesn't contribute at all to my daughter's fund. My stepson is struggling with a heroin addiction and has stolen money, jewelry, higher loans, and electronics from us for drug money. I understand that addiction is a disease, and I personally paid for an outpatient detox for him, which cost $1,000, which failed. His father then paid for an outpatient rehab program, which cost $6,500, which also didn't work because he barely showed up. He promised us he'd do better next time and he needed another chance. So I split the cost of another $6,500 outpatient rehab program with my husband, which seemed to work during program, but he relapsed as soon as he got out of it. I have spent so much money, time, and energy and it hasn't helped at all. My husband and my stepson want to try a 60-day inpatient rehab program, which will cost $30,000. I had absolutely no idea where they were supposed to get the money for that, considering the thousands and thousands of dollars that were already spent, and the fact that we no longer had anything of value in our house. They want to use my daughter's college fund, which to me is absolutely off limits. I feel like it's completely unfair to my daughter to punish her for my stepson's addiction. Unfair to my late husband and his parents, but frankly, I don't think spending $30,000 will work. My husband thinks I'm an asshole because I'm prioritizing my daughter's education over his son's life. And he believes medical needs come first. He then asked my daughter if she'd be willing to use $30,000 from her fund to pay for her stepbrother's rehab. And she got very quiet and did not answer. He then got very upset with her and said she was being selfish. My daughter later told me that she didn't want to give her stepbrother the money, but she felt so guilty. And I am furious at my husband for emotionally guilt-tripping my daughter like that. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount and I didn't want to be braggy about it. Especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place. And in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he's started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister. But it was for non-profit work making $22K /year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity /equity /inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday.